at the start of school and how warm it was because they really wanted fall to be damp and gray, and it was, quote, depressing. So you know that they're Pacific Northwest kids.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast. Thrilled that you're here today. My conversation today is with my guest, Ronit Plank. Ronit is a Seattle area author and podcast host. She's written a memoir called When She Comes Back, which is the story of Ronit's childhood during the 70s and 80s, while her mother had left to go follow a guru in India and ultimately in Oregon. Ronit also created 3 different podcasts through the years, and then everything changed, The Body Myth, and her most recent is Let's Talk Memoir. We're going to talk about all of those a little bit during this conversation. We're going to talk about Seattle, things to do, and Ronit's whole backstory. She grew up in New York but moved to Seattle at an early age. It's a fascinating story, one that I found to be quite entertaining and very informative. But before we get started, welcome to all of you who have maybe just found our show. Thrilled that you're here. Those of you that are regular listeners, thank you so much for checking in with us. If you ever need to get a hold of me, you can reach me at podcast@explorewashingtonstate.com. As always, we'd appreciate it if you'd, give us a share, give us a like, talk about it with your friends, because that's how these type of shows grow. And let's get started. So Ronit, thanks for taking the time to sit with me today. Appreciate you doing this. Now that we've cleaned up our spilled water, let's get started.
It wasn't your spilled water. It was mine. You don't have to protect me.
I wasn't trying to completely throw you under the bus quite yet. So anyway, why don't you go ahead so this is what I know about you. You're an author. Mm-hmm. You have a podcast. Mm-hmm. You've got a really interesting backstory. Your memoir is an interesting story. But before I let you talk about yourself, I'm actually on your LinkedIn profile right now. And I could make this may go over funny, which is intended to. It may be a complete bomb, but let's just try it. So it says experienced writer, The Atlantic, The Washington Post, The Huffington Post or HuffPost, The Iowa Review.
Oh, okay. You're asking me why it's up there?
I think Iowa. I think corn. I don't think literature. What's the Iowa Review?
Okay. So the Iowa Review is a very well-respected literary journal. And
this is going to bomb.
No, but I get it. No, it totally makes sense. No, most people wouldn't know that. And sometimes I wonder when I submit work, it depends on where I'm submitting. If I'm submitting for a very fast traffic place that doesn't really care about literature necessarily, I omit that from my bio, from my byline. But if it's a literary magazine or a place where I'm trying to write an article about craft and writing, then I always keep it in. I won runner up. I got second place in the awards like 7 or 8 years ago for a short story that's now in a collection that's forthcoming from another press. And so nice. For me, it was a really big coup for me because I was a fairly new writer just starting to publish stories. And the fact that I placed in the contest, which have you ever heard of the Iowa Writers Workshop at all? So
no,
it's it's a renowned writing program, and people who go out, go there, come from there, people are really impressed. And so for me, even to be able to say that made me really happy.
Awesome. And I was just trying to be tongue in cheek because I drove through Iowa once. Iowa was miserable to drive through because it was just straight, flat corn. It was
you don't have to tell me. I'm a New Yorker living out in the Pacific Northwest, so I'll make fun of most places.
Okay, very good. So writer, podcaster.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about? Writing, podcasting?
Oh my gosh. Well, I bet you we could cover both. I mean, you're quick on your feet and so am I. And, you have a lot of experience in that realm. I would say in general right now, I'm a mom of 2. I've got teenagers. I've been living in Seattle since 2005. But in my memoir, I talk about how it was the first place I lived really after leaving Israel. And so I have some young memories of Seattle, as well as in my summers as a teenager, I came to visit my mom out here and worked at Woodland Park Zoo as a volunteer. And I waitressed at Ivar's. on the water.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, I did a lot of like fun Seattle stuff back in the 80s and 90s. And now I live here raising a family. So that's interesting to me, like the change that's gone through my life as well as the city.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've taken classes at University of Washington and Hugo House, and my
Okay.
writing is a lot about parenting and self-worth. And I have a whole bunch of different things we could talk about.
Awesome. Well, really important. Do your kids like living in Seattle?
Yes, I think they do. In fact, I was in a car recently with my daughter and her friends, and they're 17, 16, and they were lamenting how sunny it was at the start of school and how warm it was because they really wanted fall to be damp and gray, and it was, quote, depressing. So you know that they're Pacific Northwest
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, they are. Oh my gosh. What was the impetus for you to start your career as a writer? Did you start with a memoir, or did you start writing other things before that? What got you
Yeah.
sitting down and writing?
Well, thanks for asking that. So, I actually used to act when I was in New York. I studied with Uta Hagen and Alfred Molina, and I was out of college, out of a state school. I went to Binghamton, and I thought I would try acting. And so I started doing off Broadway, like off Broadway, black box theater, one act plays to get agents to come to. And then I moved to LA for an opportunity, and I made my life in LA, which is where I met my husband. And in LA, I started doing improv. I performed improv shows and started working at the Actors Gang, which is Tim Robbins Theater. And luckily, about a year or two at the Actors Gang in LA, I got to write several pieces of theater that I got to perform,
Okay.
monologues, sketch, things like that. And I also did sketch at the Groundlings a little bit. And so that was my foray into writing. And my sister actually had told me for years, she's a TV writer and screenwriter as well as an actor. She said, "Why don't you write?" And I really didn't see myself as a writer, but I guess she heard something in me. And so it wasn't until we moved to Seattle when my first was about 5 months old. And then I had my second that I went to University of Washington Extension and started taking fiction classes. And this is back in 2009. And actually at the time, I remember asking the teacher, should I take fiction or nonfiction? I don't actually even know really what to do. I don't even know what I like. So I started with fiction, started writing short stories, starting to publish them. And then I started writing essays that became more and more personal, things that were kind of bubbling up within me that became the foundation of what would be my memoir. And I ended up going to grad school at Pacific University on a low residency type of program. And I switched from fiction to memoir. And that's where I wrote my thesis, which was the beginning of my book, When She Comes Back. And so now I'd say I write a lot of nonfiction and memoir. I like to write parenting articles and self-care articles. I am dabbling in creative nonfiction and flash pieces like flash fiction, flash short stories, poetry, things like that. So I'm kind of
So
all over the map.
let me interrupt you. What do you mean by flash pieces?
Okay, so flash will be short, and
Okay.
different places will have a different word, like a different amount of words that they require. So, in general, flash fiction or flash nonfiction is 1,000 words or less, but some flash publications want it 500 or less. And the place where I'm an editor at the Citron Review, which is a short literary magazine, for short work. And
Mm-hmm.
I co-edit the creative nonfiction. So we only want 1,000 words and less.
Okay.
And I love that format because while I am an incredibly long-winded person, which you can tell just in this short 10 minutes, I love the idea of taking a story, shrinking it down to its essence, and trying to convey what you want to convey in a spare way.
Well, and what I've read now, I am not an author. I'm not a writer, and I don't know if it was it Twain that was this
Mm-hmm.
quote, something like, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have
Have
enough
time.
time.
Yeah.
And it is when you try to become economical. Words can be hard for me, even though I talk a lot. Economical with your words.
Mm-hmm.
What do you cut out? How do you replace what you cut out with something that's simpler and more
Yeah, it's
concise?
amazing. It's such a feeling. I love the feeling. Actually, the very first time I ever did shrink a piece was I had a pretty long short story and I found a contest that wanted 1,000 words. And no, it was 500 words. And I just started hacking, chopping, dicing. And I ended up winning a contest for the prompt because of it. And I thought,
Okay.
this is brilliant. You can do all the work on the front and then you can shrink it and like make this really complex story. What's harder to do, but something I still love, is to try to convey what you want economically from the beginning, right? Just right out of the gate. But I also love playing with forms which are unexpected, which I'm just beginning to do this, but there's something called lyric essays, which are essays that kind of occupy space in a different way. They could be a list. They could be like, for example, a recipe. You talk about what you want to talk about in the guise of a recipe. So you're getting to create in all these ways that are outside of the box. And it's so fun for me because I'm kind of a type A person, and to be able to play that way with writing is really fun for me.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the memoir.
Okay.
Obviously, it's published. The listener should go grab a copy of it and read it in its entirety. But how about you just give us the
spiel,
the spiel, or the back of the cover review? Let's go the spiel.
So essentially, many listeners in this area and also in the Oregon area. Are you laughing because you know what I'm going to say?
No, I was going to insert my "Oregon's dead to me" line, but it's well, you will be given permission to talk about Oregon.
Okay,
it's appropriate.
Can we dig into that, Scott? I would like to know a little bit more about that.
The Oregon's dead to me.
Yeah.
It's simply because this is the Exploring Washington State show.
Okay,
and so whenever I have guests from, down south, like Vancouver, they'll inevitably, like, somebody will go like, well, I live in Vancouver, but I'd like to do this and this in Portland. And I'm just like, Portland's dead to us. It's just Portland's a great city. Oregon's fine. I have no beef with it. It's just the running gag.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, okay, so essentially there was a guru named Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh who had his start in India and then relocated his ashram with the help of his right-hand woman, Ma Anand Sheela, back in the late 70s, early 80s to Antelope, Oregon. I had to say it. I'm sorry. I will not bring up the place again.
No, you can.
And they established an ashram there. And what was very interesting about Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh was that he was sometimes known as the sex guru. And that's not something I knew until much later in my life. And he had a giant following of Westerners, educated Westerners, who flocked to try to explore their own enlightenment and sexuality and freedom and et cetera, and be told kind of how to live, think, and dress. And so in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, my family moved from Israel, where I had been raised on a kibbutz. My parents are American Jews, and we moved to Seattle so my father could go to grad school at University of Washington. And they got divorced in Seattle. This is part of the book. The memoir opens around here. And my father moved to Jersey. He said goodbye to us and moved to Jersey. And then my mom was raising two young kids, me like 4.5, 5, and my sister 2.5, alone in a city she knew no one, out of a kibbutz, which is a work farm community. For the first time in her life, she didn't even know how to write checks. She ended up becoming involved in a Bhagwan group, like a Rajneeshi meeting center in Capitol Hill. Her friend introduced her to books and tapes, and she started listening. And so basically, now I'll speed it up. Basically, she decided she wanted to go to India and follow Bhagwan. She dropped us off in Jersey, and that's exactly where my book starts, at the airport, where she's dropping us off with our father, who we haven't seen for a year because he left, and we're really young. And so this is kind of a book about your parents leaving, going from a safe enclave, kind of almost idyllic childhood, to being dropped into divorce, an urban setting, parental loss, and trying to grow up without your mom there and always wanting her, and being like in a family with a single father who doesn't quite know how to do it, even though he really wants to. And so it's called When She Comes Back, because I spent most of my childhood waiting for my mom to return.
I could go down so many, I mean, I have so many questions about that. So this is in the 1980s. And unlike today, we all carry, and I'm holding up my iPhone for those of you that are listening and can't see me, which is everyone, but I'm holding up my iPhone, and we carry these with us, and we talk to people 24/7. You're amazingly connected to people across the world, but we didn't have that connectivity back in the 80s. Did you hear from your mother at all during this period? I mean,
Yeah, you're right about
in
that.
communication? Did letters back and forth, long distance phone calls at night type thing?
Yeah,
or?
really good question. So the first place we lived, my sister and me, was in subsidized housing in Newark, New Jersey, where my father was living with his girlfriend at the time and her 2 daughters. And it was a very teeny apartment, and we were only supposed to be there for the summer. But then my mom kept delaying her return from Pune, from India. And we'd get letters that just, love you, and like, I'm not coming back until, and then the date would move. And there were some promised phone calls, and very few of them happened. I think there is a scene where I'm waiting for my mom to call pretty much all day from India, and she doesn't call. My mom and I were not in touch really while she was gone, and she was gone for almost a year before she returned. And then things kind of became a little more predictable. We started seeing her every other weekend, and she kind of cut her hair and got rid of the nose ring, and stopped wearing the jangly bracelets. And also, all of these followers of Bhagwan, they were called sannyasins, would wear a black beaded necklace, a mala, at the end of which was his black and white photo, Bhagwan. So she was in the city for that first year wearing this. And we got to see her for a while. And then when the ranch opened up in Oregon, oh gosh, I said it again, she ended up leaving again. So she left twice. But the second time was really quite a blow, because, I mean, they were both blows, because I think I started to take for granted that our lives were predictable. And, I had what I had. I had 2 households. My mom was still sort of there. I loved her. I loved my father. I was growing older. But once she left the second time, things just really got bad for me. And it was really hard to write about that. And, ultimately the book is also about reconciliation, because I have a great relationship with my mom now. I have a great relationship with my father. I see my mom, like, she lives 5 minutes away from me. We do Shabbat dinner, which is a Friday night dinner, culturally very Jewish. We've talked about a lot of it. And there's a scene in my memoir toward the end about the very conversation that helped me feel even closer to her after all these years. And that was really important. And actually, the book was written by the time we had that conversation that was really unexpected. The book was pretty much done, and I added it and kind of edited, because I thought it was so important.
Okay. Does your sister have a good relationship with your mother now?
Yes. My sister's in California, and, I think birth order and personality has so much to do with a kid's, a family dynamic, right? And I was the typical older, and I think I shielded her a bit from some of the stuff that was going on. And so our experiences were really different. And in many ways, she got closer to my dad than I did, because I was sort of the partner to my father in the household. Without my mom there, I became very wife-like in terms of cooking and cleaning. And so that became a burden for me, whereas my sister didn't have that. But my sister has her own stuff, and she's definitely written a little bit about it too. And it's complicated, but I think one thing in our family is that we really do we're pretty honest. I mean, I don't think anyone could be ever 100% honest, because it's hard to even know what you think on any given day, or who you are on any given day. But I think we try really hard to cut through garbage and try to be honest with each other.
So through the years, then you've reconciled with your mom, and you have a good relationship with your father. So that's, at least the story has a positive nature to it in some ways, right? I mean, at least you've got that. How long was your mom in Oregon? Oh, I said it now.
That was my trick. I got you to do it. That's all this interview is about, Scott. She was there toward the end. So if anyone remembers, and there's also a docuseries on Netflix called Wild Wild Country that really was popular in 2018, 2019. You can still find it, and it covers this whole story. The FBI swooped in on the ranch in November or October of that last year. I want to say 85. It's in my book. It's right. I can't remember. And my mom got there in June. and everything kind of fell apart over there by the fall. So she was there at the tail end, but the ranch itself was established for about 5 or 6 years. And they, for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, they had an airport, they had an airstrip, and they had bus system and post office and restaurants and discotheques. Like they had a town, you know?
See, so what I remember, so in the mid 80s, I would have been in college and self-absorbed, um, which is the only thing I can say now is that I'm not in college and I'm self-absorbed.
I mean,
No,
if there's ever a time to be self-absorbed, right?
right.
Yeah.
But what I remember of it is this gray hair, black and white photos of the guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Long beard, things like that. And I think I saw this on like the local, Como King 5 news. I don't know which, but some local news. He had a large number of Rolls Royces.
Yes.
That's what I remember. I have not watched the Netflix documentary, so I did not know there was a bus system or a post office or I had no idea. Because question, this is I don't know that you know the answer. This is the rabbit hole I go down. Have you ever talked to your mom about what life was like on it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So was it, see, to me, when I see this guy with this opulent wealth and were his followers impoverished or were they empowered? What was the life like on this property?
I think that, so there was a lot of meditation. There was dynamic meditation, which I'm just going to start with the like easy stuff dynamic meditation, this kind of stuff he kind of developed where you would get into such a frantic state, such an elevated state, breathing fast and moving your body so fast that you would just, be exhausted and drop to the ground, but you clears your mind in that kind of meditative or high exercise way. There was, you had to wear colors of the sunset. So people were wearing the oranges and they were wearing the blushes and then they were wearing red. It became more red later. That's how you knew you wore the necklace. You would wear the mala. And I think everyone had their jobs. I think there was an inner circle on the ranch in Antelope, inner circle. And then there were a lot of people living in houses and small little shacks and in small places. And they would do a lot of work. I mean, they also constructed this place out of nothing. Like this was the Big Muddy Ranch. This was the Big Muddy Ranch for a long time. They grew fields and fields of beautiful vegetables, and they did all this gorgeous mining of the resources. Like it was really impressive, actually. But things became a little more and more nefarious. So while my mom was there, I'm sure there was fun, but there were also lectures. And I think that there was open sexuality, which, to answer your earlier question, my mom doesn't go into great detail with me about India or Antelope. And it's not that I don't get the sense she's trying not to share it. I really don't think she saw a lot of the stuff that people write about. Like she never saw abusive therapy groups, she says. I mean, she walked on hot coals. She wore the clothes. She doesn't even remember seeing the kids that were on the ashram running around. And I have that in my book too. What was it like for my mom to see these kids when she was away from us? But I just think people, we get blinders on sometimes and we just do what we need to do for ourselves, the self-absorption. And I do think, echoing what you said about being in college and self-absorbed, I think is a really nice way to think about it. Bhagwan's whole thing was you need to become enlightened. You need to shed the harness of your family. Women should think about getting sterilized. Men should think about getting vasectomies. Children are they're completely a distraction from your own journey. So families were not fostered here. And, whether or not you were left by your family or you were brought and you had to live there communally with other kids. I've talked to people who have survived that. They were guests on my podcast. Like, it doesn't sound great, like as much as I missed my mom, knowing what I know about those conditions, I'm super happy that I got to stay back. And I think that even now, when my mom looks back on it, she says, even 10 years ago, I wouldn't have done something like that. But there were years after she came back where she'd quote Bhagwan to me. She would offer advice based on a Bhagwanism. And, people were seekers. And I think that a cult leader, a quote, spiritual leader gives people permission to maybe not push themselves in ways that they could. I think that it's such a fallacy for me in many ways when people go to seek, gurus and spiritual enlightenment, but they're running away from themselves in often, many cases, and the connections where they could really learn. As a mom and as a wife, I've learned far more about myself and what I can do and what I can't do and where I need to work personally than I would by going to some commune where people don't really know me or care about me. So this whole, take off to go figure out who you are, like all we
Mm-hmm.
are is what we are. Like we can get better, more honest, more vulnerable, more empowered, more confident, but the raw material is what we've got. And
Mm-hmm.
nowhere, you cannot fly away to find a better version of yourself.
Especially to Oregon.
Yeah, definitely Oregon. Yeah, I mean, not Oregon. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Sorry. The book, and I haven't read the book. So the question I'm going to ask, I should probably know the answer to ahead of time. Just giving you that. But who's the publisher? And what was that process like?
Okay. Motina Books is the publisher, and I found Motina Books. I'm part of a lot of writing communities on, Facebook and Instagram. I've met so many lovely writers, especially memoirists, and I've hosted some of them on my podcast, and I've been a guest of theirs. And it's just been a lovely time to not be isolated during a pandemic. I've had a great book launch despite the pandemic being, part of it. So I saw that this tiny publisher, the tagline was books for mothers by mothers. And I thought, boom, that's perfect. And so I wrote to her and I sent her my proposal and we connected. We had a meeting on Zoom because she's in Texas and she wanted to work with me and I wanted to work with her. I had originally sent it out. I did the agent search that a lot of people do. Writers will probably be familiar with this, but that idea that you're going to be with the big press and, you're going to have the front of some stack at like Barnes and Noble, like that is a beautiful, beautiful dream that I hope one day maybe will belong to me as well. But it's also really hard to get your book published sometimes, especially memoir. I'm not famous. I didn't kill anyone. I, wasn't addicted to something and escaped the commune, like I'm just this mom who, I'm just this like regular woman who went through a lot of stuff and I live to tell the tale. So I understood about 6 months into the process that even if I found an agent, because I did get some requests, even if I did get a publisher or an agent, it would take a while for this book to come out. And because there's a delay in like editing and getting you set up and all that. And the Netflix docuseries was out, people were talking about Bhagwan and I realized I need to get this out there. And this publisher loves my work and she's championing me. And so that's what I did. I went with her and it's been a great relationship. And I've actually sent a lot of writers I know her way.
Okay. Question for you. So I recently, a few weeks ago, had another Seattle area author on, and he had just released a book called The Lost Roadhouses of Seattle about the roadhouses in the King County, Snohomish County area during Prohibition, all this stuff. So the question I asked him, and I'll ask you, what was the reaction when you saw, have you seen your book?
In the wild?
In the wild.
Yes.
Okay. Where was it? Because his answer was, caught me off guard. So my question to you is, what was your reaction when you saw the book for the first time in the wild?
I was so happy. I saw it at Third Place Books Ravenna, and I've seen it at Third Place Books Seward Park. And I loved it. Like it was like, I've also seen it at Queen Anne Books. And of course it's on Amazon. So I don't know if that counts, but
no, it does. But the point is, so I asked him this question, right?
Yeah.
I go, so your first book, what was your, and he goes, I was just, kind of like you. It was like awesome and all this. And I said, so unlike you, he didn't volunteer. I said, so where was it the first place that you saw your book? He goes, Bartell Drugs.
Wow.
And I was just like, I go in to pick up a prescription and there's my book.
Yeah. But that's actually good news because that means that they feel it's a big, like it can sell a lot,
Right. And so I was expecting him to say something like what you just said, Third Place Books, or, is it still Elliott Bay Books? Or
yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Okay. So, I was expecting a local bookstore. That's what I was expecting. But no, was not expecting Bartell drugs.
You know
That
what?
was
If I saw my book at a pharmacy though, I'd be like, wow, that is a very like popular title, because it's, a memoir isn't for everyone. And a memoir about this kind of stuff isn't necessarily for everyone.
right.
But I will say a recent review mentioned that though the subject matter is complex and a little bit difficult sometimes, it's not triggering she wrote, is not triggering somehow. It's kind of like magic that way. So, there's a lot of, I think as a writer and as a mom and as a speaker, and just as someone who went through this, I'm trying to write a book that I would want to read, and so the
Mhm.
thing about a memoir is that you have to have this reflective voice, not just the story, but this like pondering and introspection and trying to understand something, which
Mhm.
hopefully the reader will be excited about to try to figure out what you're trying to figure out.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I, I haven't had anything in my life remotely close to that experience, your experience, to go through. Um, Tangentially, there was something that happened in the 70s that impacted my father's boss. And I, my father was working for a company, and his boss's daughter was one of Ted Bundy's victims.
Oh no, God.
So, I mean, that was an iconically horrible story that lasted for, many, many years.
Mm.
And I just remember being a young kid and having a young kid's observations of this individual who I would see on an occasional basis. And basically person was, in my interpretation, just kind of a shell of a human being. His world was ruined because of this. So, but that's not my world. So I couldn't imagine. I guess what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way or awkward way is I don't know how I would be able to write about it. So I'm imagining that for you to sit down and document it and write it and then have somebody say it's not triggering is a big, big compliment.
Yeah. I mean, and I understand and recognize that may not be the case for a different reader. Everyone is so different, but I definitely don't put anything in there for shock value. At the end of the day, I want it to be a book that my children can read, and I showed the manuscript to my family before I made the final changes. That's important to me. I don't want to surprise anyone. And,
right.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know what my next book is a collection of short stories, which is a whole different, bag. It's fiction, great. And I'm not sure what the next one will be after that. I think it's really important to protect our kids' privacy and, our family and honor people and kind of walk the walk and, talk the talk.
Right. Well, we'll go there then. So you just mentioned you're doing a book of short stories. What, if anything, are you willing to share with us about that?
I am very happy to share. The book is called Home is a Made Up Place. And it is stories I published. All but one have been published before in magazines, including the Iowa Review, not the Atlantic. Sorry.
Wait. Were any of them published in an Oregon?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that would be just too much. So, so that won an award actually for women over 40 and through an arts center called Hidden River Arts. And that's out of Pennsylvania. And that is supposed to be out soon. I've got the cover art for it. It's another small press. The publisher is a woman. And, this is the thing, like, I'm so delighted that anyone would like to package my short stories together to win the recognition, to win some money for that, and to be able to highlight these pieces that are in all different kinds of journals is just lovely. And so I'm super excited about that. I don't have a pub date yet. It should be soon. And, that'll also be available wherever you find my stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. So you don't have a publication date, but is it safe to assume the 2023?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Early, I hope. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Because COVID delayed it. It was actually supposed to be out a little bit like a couple of months ago, but because of COVID, there were a lot of delays in her other titles, and so I'm like the last one of this crop. Yeah.
Okay. But you don't have anything in the works for the next
Oh
project
gosh,
yet?
you mean my my sophomore book is taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was kind of vacillating between doing a nonfiction book that it required research and interviews, and working on a novel which I've been kind of writing on for a while, and then I have
Mm-hmm.
all these little short pieces. So I'm not totally sure. I kind of was in that phase of really pushing myself and making myself sit down, which is good, but also realized, okay, whoa, what do you want to do? And right now I'm getting ready to launch season 2 of Let's Talk Memoir. And that is a lot of interviews. I'm reading tons of books every week to prepare and get my guests, books in my head so I can ask them the right questions. And so I
Okay.
think, sometimes my stuff is less generative, but more productive. And then I'll
Okay.
move back once those shows are recorded and post production and in the world, then I'm back into my kind of, generative creative space.
Well, before we talk about your podcast, going to put you on the spot. You mentioned a nonfiction. What would you write about if it was a nonfiction title? What
Well,
are you going to pull out?
I can't tell you too much about that because then it would be like, my idea in the wind before I did anything. But I will say I love interviewing people, much like you. Like, it's something I do a lot and I'm comfortable with it. I love to
Okay.
learn more about things. I did a short run of a podcast called The Body Myth. And so I thought about doing body image in women in America. And I started researching for that. I even wrote a proposal and everything. But then I
Mm-hmm.
realized, I'm not the one. I spent a lot of time on it, but then I realized I'm not really the one to do this. I'm not a therapist.
Okay.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not living in a fat body. I don't have anything that different to say, except for the same tape that's running through my head as a lot of the women out there that I know, which one could argue is a reason to write it because it's so ubiquitous. But I thought, I think I'm going to leave this to other people. And then I found out that one of my guests, who's an expert on misogyny, she's a philosopher, is writing a book about fat phobia. And I thought, well, actually, I want to read your book. I don't want to write mine. I was like, you're writing the book that I wish I could have thought about writing. So I'm good with that
Okay.
for now. But there's a whole bunch of, there's been a lot of outreach from people who have survived parents leaving for cults. There's been a lot of outreach for people who have left coercive movements. So there's a part of me that was kind of in that field for a while when the book first came out. So there's lots of
Mm-hmm.
things. I mean, I find a lot of things really interesting. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea is, what do you want to spend time researching, interviewing, and writing about for years?
Okay. I will give you credit for dodging that question extremely well.
I think I gave you some actual
You did. I'm
details.
teasing.
I
I'm
gave you some
teasing.
nuts and bolts.
So while you were talking before I could ask my question, you said you're gearing up for your next season of your podcast. You're reading lots of books.
Yeah.
And you take the exact opposite approach that I take. I go in and I'm thinking about changing my approach candidly, but I go in for the most part with an open mind and trying to be very curious about what my guests are doing. And when I talk to authors, in some cases I've not read the book. In your case, I haven't read your book. Some cases I've read all of a book or part of a book or done a little reading online to get a synopsis, the cliff notes of the book. Because I truly like to genuinely be surprised, and open to what you might say that sparks curiosity in me.
Mm-hmm.
That's me. You, on the other hand, just said you're doing reading and all this. So before we talk about your show too much, I'd really like to just, out of my own curiosity, and sorry, listeners, you get to listen to what Scott wants to hear right now. What do you do to prepare for an episode?
Okay, I love this question because there's a contrast, and I'm a lot like you in some ways. So the very first podcast that I did on my own is called "And Then Everything Changed," and that ran for 2 years, and that is about the pivotal moments in people's lives and the decisions that define them. So that was stories of vulnerability, recovery, anything where they made a change in their life and are living that way. And so I love doing that. And for that, I rarely read the books because I was kind of going into it like you. I would do a pre-interview, much like you do, just to get a sense of their story, to make sure that they've got something compelling to share, but not go into it very, very detailed because I'd want that to be fresh for the interview. And so that's what I did for 2 years. But then I realized, wow, I've been writing about memoir. I wrote a memoir. I've learned a lot about memoir. I studied it in grad school. I do love the genre. though I began as a self-hating memoirist, I didn't understand the genre and I didn't like get it compared to fiction. Why is this moving
Hmm.
so differently? Where's all the tension? And I realized that sometimes memoirs are lacking in tension, which make them less effective memoirs. Actually, memoirs can read as interestingly as fiction. So
Hmm.
anyhow, I decided to launch Let's Talk Memoir, and I did that last year. And for that, I find the guests whose work I admire, guests who are teaching books that have done really well. And for the most part, I read their books. This season one, I didn't get to read many of their books because it was very cramped. This time I'm reading all of their books, and I've got a
Okay.
mix of teachers, debut memoirists who have been out for a long time. And I read the book, I take notes, and then I ask questions that are general questions like, what are your favorite memoirs and what advice do you have for writers? Those I always ask. Tell me about
Hmm.
your memoir. But then I'll dig deeper for the specific memoir. If I'm talking to someone about they're writing about voice and how important our voice is, we'll spend that whole episode really dancing around and talking about the importance of voice in writing. There's so many aspects of memoir that I find very interesting. And most of my listeners, I would say, are not just people who love memoirs, but people who are writing theirs or who want to write theirs. And so they're
Okay.
looking for some hands-on tools. And I'll tell you, just like you have a niche podcast here, I love having a niche podcast because the expectations are so different. And I've heard from so many people who will write to me and say, I love that episode. When's it coming back? Or can you please make sure you tell me the name of that author for that article you mentioned? Like, it's just been fantastic and then people have been sharing it, which I love. There will be writers and writing teachers who say they love my podcast, which means the world to me, being a writer who only came to it about 10 years ago, right? Like, it's a really big feeling of warmth and acceptance. And so I'm not trying to be, would I love a million people to listen to my podcast? Yes. Do I think that Let's Talk Memoir is going to become a blockbuster hit? No. But I think that the people who enjoy it and, gain something from it really love it. And it's evergreen, which I love because it's
Hmm.
always relevant. And some people are using it a little bit like a class.
I'm on my iPad here, and I'm scrolling through
Oh, yeah.
some show
Thanks for
notes
doing that.
for your. So you did in season one. You did 15 episodes.
Yes.
How often did you release?
I release
an
those every
episode?
2 weeks because on opposite weeks, I was releasing the Body Myth 15 episodes. So I was like, Let's Talk Memoir 1 week, the Body Myth the next week, Let's Talk Memoir 1 week, like that.
Okay.
This time we're launching on November 15th, and it's going to be every week with a couple of other episodes in there where I speak about certain writing areas. And I'm going to take a couple of episodes as well from And Then Everything Changed, where I interviewed beloved memoirists about their lives and move them into like a holiday bonus for Let's Talk Memoir so people can enjoy their stories and learn about their lives, a little less about craft, but still reaching new listeners.
And how many episodes do you anticipate season 2 to be?
Minimum of 15, but people reach out to me quite a lot. And there are still some people that I am waiting to hear from that are, bigger guests. So I'm happy to go longer. And then there's a couple of people that don't have books coming out until later in 2023. And so I might have to come back for a season 3. Yeah.
Oh, darn.
Yeah. Well, it's work, right? Originally my husband, I remember he said to me, why are you doing all this podcasting stuff? I thought you loved writing. You're a writer. Why are you doing all this podcasting stuff? But then he kind of came around and said, he said to me 2 years after I started podcasting, I think you might have something there with the podcasting. And I was like, you think, really?
Yeah. Well, and they're not mutually exclusive.
No. But it does take time away, right? I mean, you do look with the amount of episodes you have, I want to know like how often you're recording. I mean, you must be busy.
Yeah, I am. And so today, for example, the day we're recording, I was supposed to have 3. We had technical challenges on the first one. You're the second guest of the day, and I'll have one more later in the day. So 3 today. I typically have 2 or 3 days a week where I talk to 2 or 3 people at a time in a day. And then I take days where I don't want to sit and have conversations with people every single day of the week.
Yeah.
It's I don't think it's good for the guests.
That was very delicate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think also, so this is a really interesting follow up to what you said about, what we're talking about, because the skills and the resources are different. So with podcasting, and then everything changed, the body myth, and now let's talk memoir. I'm very outward facing. I am basically shooting out generosity, and I'm giving myself too much credit, but I'm basically, my time is my guests. And while I live in fear of making a fool of myself and have imposter syndrome, so I do a lot of research and very much prepare, because I don't want to look foolish on my own show. And I'm always worried I'm going to say something that's silly or doesn't make sense. So I over prepare, and it's all about shining the light on my guest. And I've done that from the beginning. It's not a show where you're going to hear me yapping and telling you everything or interrupting you. It's not like what I'm doing here, where I'm, taking the microphone and running with it. I'm basically there to highlight my guest and to bring out whatever they can show my listeners or teach my listeners. When I'm writing, it's very self-involved, right? I mean, it is in its own way. The editing process becomes less self-involved because I have to make sure my reader understands what I'm trying to do or can follow me.
Mm-hmm.
But that is just me time, insular, quiet, with my dogs, coffee, hanging around, and not answerable to anyone. I don't have to wear makeup. I don't have to make sure my voice is okay. I love that. I'm a very big introvert in some ways, So that's why I'm asking about how busy you are, because if I was only doing this every day, I definitely would not be able to write.
So everything you said is completely valid. I agree with you. I just go a different direction. I too don't want to make a fool of myself. I too don't want to say something silly. But I also feel like if I do any preparation and I make a fool of myself, then I'm going to beat myself up for not prepping properly, so I don't prep.
Yeah. But I mean, I love.
So it's like,
but
I can at least say.
You just looked up my show notes. You're like, hey, okay, we're talking about this. Let's look that up. Okay,
but so to turn the tables, if I were you and I had written a memoir and I'm on your show, you would have read the memoir. You would have had thoughtful, insightful questions to ask me that you hope would open up a conversation that I would, expand on. Right. I, on the other hand, let's just go and let you, let you as the guest kind of
steer it. Well, because you're also like, you're kind of a proxy for the listener then in that case, don't you think? Because I mean, I always think we're sort of proxy for the listener, because we're asking the questions the listener might have, or we hope they might have, that we can get to the heart of, because we've got the guest right there. And, I will say, I still always ask after I introduce my guest with like a bio, I welcome them. And then I say, for people who haven't read your book yet, can you please share a little bit about your memoir? Because I want it in their words. I don't want to sit there and say, these are the themes in your book. I mean, I do later. I'll say, I noticed, but I want the writer to have a chance, the guest to have a chance to frame it the way they want to, because that's probably their intention. After you write a book and you spend so much time with it, you're no longer unsure what the themes are. You pretty much know what people are taking from it.
Okay. So it's just, there's just different ways of all, of us, how we all handle these things. And that's kind of the good and the not so good of podcasting, is that any person with a microphone and an internet connection can go out and spew whatever they wish to spew.
Yeah, and I think some are very chatty. Like the very first podcast I ever did, I had a co-host and she invited me to be her co-host, and it was very chatty. We were just back and forth bantering. It was only 22 minutes, 30 minutes. Very good, very feminist, and very chatty. We didn't interview anyone. It was all about our personalities. And so I think when I first started podcasting, I kind of dimmed down. I wanted to be this comfortable armchair type of person who is listening. I'm here for you. And now I come to this one, at least I feel the difference as more of like, I'm a peer of yours who has lots of questions, who knows I can learn more.
Sure. No, I think it's great. And I like doing this because I've met, in the last 2.5 years, we've been doing this, I've had conversations with people and they have become friends in real life. We go and occupy the same airspace and do things together socially. I've met many people who have fascinating stories to tell about whatever it is they're doing, from, whether it's an artist I had a conversation with a guy out of Washougal, which is really close to Portland, so I had to be careful with him. And
I just want to say, I think you're bringing it up a lot more than me now.
I know, I do. Well, so how this came about, I will interject. So I early on in the podcast, I grew up in the Tacoma area, right? And I grew up in the Tacoma in the 70s and 80s, and Tacoma in the 70s and 80s was not a great place. It was not.
Like in what sense?
Spokane,
do you mean dangerous, dirty, underdeveloped, boring?
All of the above. Yeah. Tacoma during the 80s had a really large gang population. There's a very large military presence there in the 60s and 70s. Those type of things. Tacoma's just always been in my opinion. Now I'm going to get hate mail for this, but that's okay. Tacoma's always been underperforming. It has never lived up to its potential. But I still thought Tacoma was better than Spokane. And this isn't necessarily fair because I had only gone to Spokane like 2 or 3 times as a kid. But yet it was kind of the thing to do. Kind of like maybe I'm imagining somebody from the city in New York would talk down about New Jersey.
Oh, definitely. Or Staten Island. Right. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, and it's like, oh, you're from there.
Do you know what the slang was when I was coming up for that? Bridge and tunnel. The bridge and tunnel people. Because they're from the boroughs. They're not the boroughs in other parts. Yeah.
Right. So early on in the show, I made a comment about how as a kid, as a teenager, I thought Spokane was this dumpy place. And that now as an adult, many years later, I go to Spokane. I like Spokane a lot. Everyone listen to Scott. Scott likes Spokane. But these people they started making comments about have you been to Spokane lately? And I had said I had. So I got to be careful what I say. I don't have to, but I choose to be careful what I say about Washington State, but Oregon's fair game. So
I hear you.
And it's just kind of a running gag.
Yeah. But because I'm sure you choose Oregon over Iowa. Oh, what? Really?
I don't know. So here's what's funny is that when I look at my podcast stats, I will not mention the city, but there is one city in Oregon that's in the top 10 for listeners.
That's interesting.
I know, isn't it? And actually in the top 10, there's one from New Jersey too.
Really?
So there you go. Yeah.
That's interesting.
So your prep, I like the difference in the way you're prepping versus the way I'm prepping. And so here's the thing. We all get to do our shows the way we want to and publish them, and they can be listened to or they can be ignored.
Yeah.
There's not a test you have to take to make a fool of yourself behind a microphone.
No, I mean, it's the good and the bad, right, of this.
Right.
But of course, if you're really not producing good content, you're not going to have listeners, right?
Right. Well, or even if you are, discoverability in podcasts can be kind of challenging.
It is. It's a very saturated market.
So yeah. And anyway, and it's not something that I have found that is easy to go viral. Unlike an Instagram post or something that gets picked up by thousands and thousands of people who keep sharing it. So you're going to be doing your new season. You've got a book that's coming out. You're kind of putting together a third book concept. Something. Okay. So here's the part of the show where I ask questions that are more about your day-to-day life.
Sure.
Let's be really, the very most important question is,
I know what you're going to ask.
Coffee. Where around you is a great place to get coffee?
I love Zoka Coffee Roasters.
Okay.
So Zoka, a long time ago when I started writing, I would go to the one in Tangletown. That's where I did most of my writing. And then I would do some by University Village, go to that one too. And I like them both a lot. The one by University Village, wow, it was so expansive. There was just this, it just went on and on forever with all these beautiful wood furnishings. And now they've it's gotten a little smaller. I think they must have rented out the other side, but I love the coffee. Americanos are usually what I get. I generally, if I go, that's what I get. I don't get, I'm out of don't do the cappuccinos or lattes. I just want an Americano, and I'll have a little bit of sugar and a little bit of cream, and I could drink a couple of those a day. And the one in Tangletown is really nice too. And also, oh gosh, for the longest time, you didn't ask me this, but I have to tell you, they had the best muffin there, and I haven't seen it lately. It was this kind of berryish bran muffin, and they'd warm it up, and then I put butter on it, and I was like, heaven. It was like the best thing ever. And so I do work from home a lot more than I used to. I used to write only out of
Hmm.
the house because I felt like I needed that space. But yeah, so if I'm out and about, that's my favorite actually. And I will say
All right.
I'm
So
of a
if
like a medium to dark roast coffee lover. I know the youth is enjoying lighter roasts, which apparently are supposed to be more erudite and have more caffeine in them, but I can't help it. I like the toasty, roasty, like dark chocolatey kinds of coffees.
excellent answer.
I'm oh good,
Well,
good, good.
because I would have given you a hard time if you would have said something like a cappuccino with hemp milk or something.
I don't, I just don't
I
need it, man.
I'm just a
Purist.
black pour over coffee, French press,
Yeah.
espresso, no sugar, no cream. Every
Every
now and then
now
I'll
and
have a
then.
thing. But when you're at home, coffee at home.
Yes. And this is funny because my partner, my husband, does not drink coffee. He doesn't understand it. He drinks Earl Grey tea and he loves it. And I know, you're making a face. For those of you who can't
I
see it, he's
am.
making a face. He found this. I introduced him to this one that has beautiful little petals in it from the flower, and he loves it. Like loves his tea. And for me, it's just like weak sauce. It's weak. And so he thinks that I drink. I make a pot of coffee, which is really, it's a drip coffee, and I don't love it all the time.
Okay.
Sometimes I mess it up because I don't grind it right. Like for all these years, I should know how to do it. But sometimes it just doesn't strike me the right way. And so he thinks I'm sipping coffee all day long. He's like, oh, look at you. And he'll pick up a mug and he just goes like he pretends, because I do drink fast, really fast. And I
Mhm.
tell him all the time, I make a half a pot, three quarters of a pot, and maybe I drink one and a half cup. I just never get to the rest of it. And so he thinks I'm a
Okay.
coffee addict, but actually I'm just making it every day and I sip it. And the other thing I want to say about French press is the first time I ever had a French press, I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I had never had coffee as delicious or as like I felt like I needed a fork and knife to have it because it was like so
Mhm.
delicious and chewy and amazing. And I had been making that for a while and then I stopped, but talking to you now makes me want to do French press again because it is so good.
Yeah. So what I heard was your husband doesn't understand
Yeah.
you. I'm sorry. No, but what I heard was you grind your beans.
Yeah.
You aren't always happy with the
Yeah.
results. You make a half a pot or so and you drink a little
Yeah.
of it. So questions from that. What coffee beans do you typically have at home?
1859 from PCC. That's my
Okay.
go-to. I love it. And so I just memorize it. And when I check out, this is such a dorky story, but when I check out, they'll say, there's no number on here. And I'll say, oh, that's 1859. Because I imagine that they should A, know that I'm only going to be getting that. And B, I have it committed to memory. Because even my husband who doesn't drink coffee, he's like, do you need some
Yes.
1859 when he's at the store? I'm like, yep. So that's my go-to because it's not tart.
Okay.
It's not acidic.
Okay.
I don't like that at all. It's just, like I said,
Mhm.
toasty, roasty.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I'm in a crunch, like if I'm somewhere and I need to buy beans and I'm in a shortage, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I will buy beans from Starbucks.
That's
Okay.
fine. I mean, their coffee is. Look, anybody that gives shade to Starbucks is missing the point because, well, I used to work there.
Mhm.
And that's not why I'm saying this, but why I'm saying this is when you think about it, yes, there was specialty coffee before Starbucks.
Mhm.
Seattle's, Stewart Brothers in Seattle, Seattle's Best, Pete's, all these things. And they've all kind of blended together and gone their own direction. But Starbucks was able to introduce the globe to the concept that paying $5 for a cup of hot water with some beans in
Is
it
worth it.
was acceptable.
My
right?
parents were in Seattle when they were at a restaurant and they said, hey, we're testing out, this is back in the 70s, we're testing out some new coffee. Tell us what you think. And it happened to be Starbucks.
Yeah. But seriously, Starbucks was able to convince you and I that it's okay to give them $5 for a cup of coffee or more.
Yes.
And Zoka coffee would not be around
true.
or they wouldn't be charging what they're charging.
Mhm.
So I drink Starbucks on occasion. I'll drink gas station coffee. I'm not a coffee snob in that respect. I just drink a lot of coffee.
Oh yeah. So how much do you
Coffee.
drink?
6 to 10 cups a
Get
day.
out. Really? Do you have to stop
No.
drinking at a certain point to go to sleep?
I can literally have a cup of coffee on the nightstand and still go
I
to sleep.
used to be like that, but now I'm getting older, and now I'm one of those people who has to stop by 4.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make your teeth go like, like you, that doesn't drive you up a wall?
No. Every now and then it'll hit me. Every now and then.
Do you compensate with a lot of water or electrolytes?
I drink a lot of water. Don't drink electrolytes. I drink a lot of water. Drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
I don't drink sodas. I drink coffee.
I love it.
So, all right.
Okay.
Another question I have is, and this is an easier one, around you, neighborhood wise, where's a great place to grab lunch?
Well, this is very bougie. I love to meet my friends at Mr. West at University Village. It's good. You order at the counter, and then, what I love is getting the Mr. West potato chips, and they like sprinkle Parmesan cheese on them. Or they have, I love like a really good niçoise salad. They also have, they have some really good vegan options, but they also have like grilled cheese and tomato soup. They have all kinds of yummy and good pastries. I will say though, they have the kind of coffee I don't love that much. So I don't go there for the coffee.
You don't go there for the coffee. Okay.
Where else have I been going to lunch? We go to Babar, that Vietnamese fusion restaurant. We love Babar. Okay. That's a really popular one. Yeah, I would say for lunch, that's where I go. I'm not a big sandwich person, really. So I like salads, noodles, soup, things like that.
Okay. What do you in the family? Maybe it's just you and your husband because you got teenagers. Maybe they don't want to do anything with you. I don't know.
That pretty much is the story.
Yeah, every teenager, every teenage household dynamic is a little different. But what do you and your husband like to do when you're not working?
When we're not working, well, we have 3 dogs and we adore them. And my husband has become quite the dog dad. I used to work in animal shelters, and I used to, train sea lions and seals over at an aquarium in California. So I come from like animal husbandry experience, but he has really, really gone all for it. Like he has a little fanny pack with treats. He wears a dog walking hat. I mean, it doesn't say dog walker, but it's like protects him from the sun. And he takes those little pups out, and he's like so into it. So I would say what we love to do the most is we love to go out to dinner and spend time and have a nice cocktail and have good food. We love to watch a show that we're enjoying on the couch, seriously, with the dogs. Like we're very mellow. We're not the hikers or the kayakers. We just finished The Great, about Catherine the Great. We're done with season 2, which has Elle Fanning as a star and Nicholas Hoult. And it is so good. A little bit bawdy, but we were just so happy to watch that show together on the couch with a blanket or 2.
What type of dogs?
Okay. Well, we have an allergic kid. So the first 2 are non-shedding. And I'm just going to say they are a paid for dog. And I'm sorry because I did work in animal shelters, but we have a kid with health stuff. So one is a black golden doodle who has been gaining weight and is now 93 pounds. And the vet, we said, what's up with her back? And what's up? They're like, well, she lost her waist. So we need to trim her up a little bit. We're really bad about that. She's a love. Then we have a Cavapoo, and his name is Rocket, and he's amazing and spry. And then our last one is a little mix of like Chihuahua, Dachshund, Pomeranian, a white, fluffy, adorable dog. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So they keep you busy. We have one.
What do you have?
Bernese Mountain Dog.
We love those burners.
Yeah. He's over here off camera right now. He's still asleep. As soon as I say that, though, he'll.
I didn't know for a long time that big dogs like that, they often don't need a ton of walks, and they don't have a ton of energy necessarily.
No,
he does.
He doesn't.
Okay.
He does and he doesn't. He does and he doesn't. He's a super sweet dog, super stubborn and single-minded.
What's his name?
Bosley.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Okay.
How cute.
All right. So last 2 questions for you. So we'll wrap this up for you. So I don't know if anybody could hear that. That was him kind of snoring. All right. So here we go. One requires a very specific answer from you. The other one is a free form answer.
Brother, I feel a little tense.
Cake or pie, and why?
Okay, this is horrible because I love both so much. I am so into the food, and I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I'm not going to pigeonhole myself. I'm going to say this. Cake when it's a vanilla-ish cake that is like amazing and perfect, and the frosting is buttercream all day. That's what I want. Um, Pie is amazing and slightly refreshing, and it can be argued is somewhat good for you. So, I love pie too. But you know what I don't
All right.
really need is the crust. My husband likes to pick the crust off the edge. He'll
Mm-hmm.
take your crust no matter what, even with quiche, and I'll let him have it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need that stuff. So
Okay.
I didn't answer your
All right.
question.
No, you
I'm
dodged it.
passionate about
And
the food though.
what's really funny is I've been asking this question now I stole this question from another podcast host. And unfortunately the episode I recorded with her, the technology cut out. So her episode hasn't seen the light of day, and we're going to have to sit down and record this. So we'll get back to her next season, if you will. So, but I think it's a great question, because what's so funny is that people almost always act like you do. What? I can't decide. We're also, no. The other day I had a couple of guys, I asked them, and they both answered like apple pie. I mean,
that was it.
That was like, yeah. Next question. Okay. So then the final question is, what didn't I ask you that I should have asked you? What didn't we cover that we should have brought up?
Well, I'm going to say there's nothing in my head that I feel like you covered everything. This was a far reaching conversation, and we got to spend a lot of time on, I feel like, the significant parts. And I mean, gosh, we even talked about my dogs. The only thing we didn't talk about is how much I like cheese. And so, I mean,
Okay.
I do love cheese, and it's a problem. I'm a vegetarian. I'm like a sometimes pescatarian. And I know that
Okay.
I would like ideally to eat less animal everything, but with the butter and the delicious different cheeses, I mean, you put a cheese plate in front of me and I'm just like so happy. So I guess it's a weird way to go out, but it's the truth.
All right. Well, so you kind of opened yourself up to the way I like to torture people. So I'm going to put you on the spot. You get one cheese for the rest of your life. What's it going to be?
I would say probably a dauphinois, or a délice dauphinois, or a délice de Bourgogne. Something creamy and rich.
Okay.
Truffle cheeses are good. Manchega's okay, but I like a little more creaminess. I love all the cheeses, but I would say probably some type of soft ripened situation.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Actually, I have one more question. This is about your kids.
Okay.
Do your kids listen to music much?
They do. My son makes music.
What are they listening to?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, really?
My son. Yeah. So my daughter listens to a lot of, I don't even know what to call it, stuff that I can't really find the rhythm to or the melody. It's a little rapish. She used to listen to Harry Styles, but she's 17 now. So she's kind of over that a little bit. She's like listening to stuff that Steve Lacy, she just went to that concert. She went to Tyler, the Creator. So, okay. And then she's done those. Okay. That's good. That's good information. My son is listening to LCD Sound System right now, listening to Beck, very eclectic right now. Doesn't mind a lot of synth and kind of produced music. He's all over the map, but he plays bass and guitar, and he's composing his own stuff. Radiohead, cool. He can play like all the parts of a Radiohead song or two that he loves. So I think it's amazing. I used to sing, but I could never play anything.
Okay. Where can people find out more about you online?
Okay. Thanks for asking. Hey, was that music question about my kids a bonus? Was that a throw in? I
just realized, because where I came from that is you mentioned your kids when we first started. You have two teenagers,
15 and 17.
And then we, I kind of cut them out of what do you like to do when you're not working, because they're teenagers, right?
Exactly.
So I was just curious. I mean, do they like music? What are they listening to? What?
I think they're pretty with it. Like, they definitely know more than I ever did. So people should find me ronitplank.com. It's just Ronit Plank, which I'm sure will be in the show notes because it's a weird name.
Yep.
You can find me on my website is where you'll find my book. You'll find my published articles and short stories. You will find my podcast, everything. But you can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and even TikTok under my name.
So out of all those platforms,
where am I the most?
Do you have do you have a favorite?
Instagram, I'd say. I'm there a lot. I'm on Instagram a lot. And that's where I've met a lot of people who became guests or featured me or, talked about my book, because they loved it, things like that.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Ronit, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today.
Thank you.
Talk about your book and your journey. And I'm actually going to go get a copy of the book and read it because I love to read.
Do you like audiobooks?
So it's not like it's.
Nah.
I went through a phase. I went through a phase where I really did. My problem is when I listen to audiobooks, I'm typically doing something else. So
Yes, I know, exactly.
I never feel like I get the,
Yes.
I feel like, yeah, I'm kind of vaguely aware. So when I'm reading, I tend to just not be multitasking.
I totally get that because that happens with me when I listen to podcasts and I'm folding laundry. Sometimes I just completely zone out. But for anyone who's listening, it is available. I narrated the audiobook. It's about 6 hours long total listening time. And I had it produced in a studio here in Washington. So it's in paperback, ebook, audiobook. Yeah. So you can take your choice.
So is it on, it's on Amazon?
Yeah.
It's local, and if you're in the Seattle area,
you can Third Place Books, or you can just say, hey, can you get this? They'll get it like a day or two later. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was delightful, Scott.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.